Um, when I was in the US myself, I felt like we were very isolated and I didn't really know of any other initiative. And so the speed at which you guys have created this network has been really cool and inspiring for me to see. So I'm excited to be here. And I saw that Shelly is here. Shelly, I can't believe that we crossed roads many years ago and that you've started your own place. We met, I guess, I hardly remember, but I did just look you up in the queue and I recognize your face. We met at a Care Farm Challenge, which was something we would do every year on one of the farms that participated in the program in Montana, where we would basically do like a mud run for people with disabilities that was built by the people with disabilities over a year's time. It was really funny and very scary because the farmer would always come up with extremely dangerous obstacles that were borderline safe, but we always pulled it off and kept it safe. Even were sometimes able to insure it, so that was great. Anyway, I have a few slides just to kind of run you guys through the work I do in the Netherlands, and then I have some of the stuff that we did in the US when I was there. And yeah, I'd love to have questions. I'll look at questions as I go. I might not see them all, and then we'll just deal with them afterwards. So let me just share my screen. It'll take a second. Currently, for those who are interested in it, we are in the middle of the storm that hit the US a couple days ago. So I'm sitting in the attic of my house and I can hear the wind rush around our house. So I'm going to talk mostly about care farming in the Netherlands, and then at the end I'll go into what we did in Montana, and we can talk about how other people can benefit from what we did. So in the Netherlands, the Netherlands is, I lived in Montana, so I know the ratio of Montana versus the Netherlands. The Netherlands would fit 10 times in Montana. So it's a pretty small country. But we have about 70,000 farms in the country, and about 1,350 are care farms. They all provide care that is fully integrated in the healthcare system. And so farmers are being paid to provide the care. They often have employees, an average of 5 to 10 employees in care. They provide, actually it's even more now, but closer to $350 million annually in care to 30,000 clients that we serve. And we serve people that are either youth with disabilities, developmental disabilities, adults, elderly, mental, physical, brain-related issues, addiction, reintegration. We even do reintegration programs for school kids who drop out of school. And mostly this will be day programs, short-term stay, or 24-hour live-in care. Care farming started about 25 years ago, and it kind of started growing when in the Netherlands, people who needed care could manage their own budget. And so they could choose to not just get care from an institution, but from anywhere. And they could also break up their budgets. Like, I live at an institution, but I can buy my daycare somewhere else. And there was only giant institutions where you would do the same thing, most of the year. And so care farms were, well, farms at that point, we didn't even know it was called care farms, but farms provided programs and people quickly chose them. In that time, it grew from maybe 100, 150 to over 700 farms. And then as we were doing it, we would have clients that could maybe not stay with us because they did not have that personal budget. And so then farmers were thinking, how can we contract with other budgets and insurance companies and government agencies? And they did that mostly by organizing in cooperatives and other collective initiatives. And now we have a national network of these regional organizations that can contract at all levels with all care programs that are available. And when I say fully integrated, it also means, our advocacy is at all levels, quite well organized. It's still small. Like, I'm the director of the National Federation, but I have maybe 20 people working for me, which is a lot, but it's still not very big compared to everything that's going on. This is just a picture of a care farm. This farm has a large community supported agriculture garden, supplying food for about 300 families. They have all kinds of animals. They have a little restaurant where people can come. The people serving food in the restaurant and working in the kitchen are all people who are also participants on the farm. There's a group of elderly with dementia that come every day. They serve people with mental health and youth programs. And it says here, learning, working, tasting, and participating in the green space. This is your typical farm will always combine those aspects of the green, the normal life, and the togetherness of a farm that creates a community. And I like this picture, and it's very representative of most care farms, because at an average care farm, you don't even know who's a volunteer, the farmer, or the client. Everyone is at an equal playing field, is served with their needs, and sometimes they have professional people supporting them, but nobody looks, smells, or feels like that, and it's very much a human-centered approach. So the Federation constitutes of 15 regional member organizations. It says here 900 farms. It's actually 950 now. We have a national office, and we have kind of 5 main goals. We need to secure quality, and that's been a very strong point in the Netherlands, that we have set up a national quality assurance system fairly early on, because everyone loves care farms until something goes wrong, and then suddenly all care farms are suspect. And so we wanted to make sure we set our guidelines and quality standards quite high, and to comply with all rules and regulations that we deal with. And so that's our main job. We do national advocacy, where we talk with all the national governments and other suppliers and providers. We do a lot of communication, newsletters. We do a lot of publicity. We try to make sure we organize a national care farm day every year, where all of the care farms open their doors, and so things like that. We support innovation, and we have an academy where people can buy classes and follow courses and all that stuff. Let me see, actually, I can't see the chat from here. So if there's anyone with questions now, you can also just unmute and ask. So I thought I'd go into this for a little bit. So our regional organizations are very important. And when I worked in Montana, I also realized it was quite difficult to go national, because you kind of lose contact. You don't know your people anymore. And to be connected to our federation, you have to be a member of the regional organization, and the regional organizations do things like, when you enter, you have to follow orientation classes, and people visit your farm and make sure you fit in with what we want to be. Then they provide all kinds of study groups and continued education. And so our regional organizations are very, very important. And they also continue to visit each other to kind of learn from each other and keep an eye on each other. We have a handbook for people who start. I got it translated through an some sort of online program, and sent it to Kate and Andrea. So, if people are interested in that, it might be over the top and mostly for the Dutch circumstances, but it might be helpful. The Academy is only a year old. We have a knowledge bank where all the rules and regulations that you need to comply with, and they are myriad. They are so many rules that we have to comply with. We've simplified it. We call it Quality for Dummies, into our quality assurance system, which is totally digital. If a farm works with us, they have to use it, and they're basically guided step by step through all the regulations they have to comply with. We have the website, Oh yeah, we have an independent national complaint center, which is also very important. You know, if people have a gripe with their farm, they have to be able to go somewhere. It's a rule in the Netherlands, but it's also very good. I think it's good to hold yourself accountable. And to give you an idea, with 30,000 clients a year, we get them. In my 4 years, we've had the maximum of 12 complaints come in with the national center per year. So it's actually fairly limited. We also have a risk assessment tool and organization, and then lots of newsletters. You know, there's fortunately or unfortunately, there's always news. So, oh, there you go. The handbook is online already. Very good. So let me see. Yeah, and so what's fun is that we get a lot of calls and we talk with a lot of other countries. Belgium, Norway, Austria are very big on care farming. England and Ireland have been really working on it. And then you see on the right, I get several calls a month of people, you know, that somehow, and because I worked in America for a while, I was like one of the few English resources on there. And so I would get a lot of calls. It's getting less now. It can all come to you guys now. That's great. But yeah, we get a lot of visitors from Asia as well, and Eastern Europe. And it's interesting. Sometimes it comes from farming backgrounds or agricultural governments that say we need more than just large scale farming. We want models that are more multifunctional oriented. And I worked in the simulation of multifunctional agriculture for about 10 years, a long time ago now. And it was the same in the Netherlands, where basically the agricultural governments supported this as a new way of entrepreneurship for farms. But then over time, you see it's more and more integrated into care. Like, we are still very much a farm and care organization, but almost 90% of my work is related to the care we provide. And we partner with what you guys, I think, would call the Farm Bureau, I think, something like that. Except our Farm Bureau is also for small farms, and they're very geared towards the multifunctional agriculture as well. So I worked, like I said, my wife is from Montana, and we lived and worked in Montana for 5 years. And I worked for a home care company called A Plus Healthcare. They still exist. And I just saw there was no care farms, and I thought it was really surprising because it was an agricultural community and there was a huge need for other day programs than the one that had been around for a long time. And so we started them up, and at our high point, we had about 12 farms and clients from many different sources that would come to the different farms. And that was really cool. Since I left, I've been back to the Netherlands now for 6 years. It was really unfortunate how COVID hit, and during COVID, there was really almost a 2-year period where almost no people would come to the farm. So it's taken a hit. I know the programs are still there, but they're much smaller now. And I don't know how it is with you guys, but the funding streams are behind your pictures. So on the right side of the screen, if you can't see it, I listed the funding sources that I was able to secure. We had Agency on Aging money. So our regional Agency on Aging had some funding for elderly, usually who were either very alone or had dementia. They could come to certain day programs. They actually had money for caregivers to go to the houses of these people and, you know, provide companionship or respite care. And we figured out with the Agency on Aging to divert that money and use it for people to go to the farms. And so I had several farms that actually specialized in getting seniors out there. We also had SDMI waiver, which I don't know if that's in every state, but it's seriously disabling mental illness. I think that's what SDMI stood for. So it was a mental health program. And on that waiver, we were able to fund some of our day programs. We also contracted with the state on the development of disabled waiver program. That was yeah, that was a very hard program to get into, but a very good program once you were in. And I really found out that case managers were very keen to look for other places to place their people. It was kind of a bureaucratic system, so like I did a pilot, which was very fun, and I got some clients from all these sources. And then after that, I, was very successful. I thought now all of the clients will come to me and I will get all these contracts, but it took like another year before, people would start to shift people from one contract to the other. Um, there was a restorative youth program in my area, and so we did some programs with youth, and that was very rewarding because youth that got in touch, with the law usually they might have minor issues in addition to slipping up ones, but you could really, really turn them around. We would get people in there who had been in and out of contact with the police, were not living at home. And just by living and coming to these farms and having, and I had some really cool Montana rancher types that were very strong role models, and these youth could work with them and somehow experience unconditional appreciation and the value of hard work. And so we really had amazing results. And if you look at international research, youth is a wonderful population because you can make a huge difference. When I started in Montana, I wanted to do that with all populations, but I found out that with some populations like traumatic brain injury or severe developmental disability, sometimes giving people a higher quality of life or keeping them from slipping into heavier forms of care was all I could really strive for. But anyway, I did do some subcontracting for nursing homes, and kind of halfway through my time doing these programs, we got a lot of voc rehab programs up and running. We would do job readiness programs on the farm where we would teach them all kinds of job skills. It's the cool thing on a farm is you can do, anything from mechanical work to working with other people to working at a little store. And with voc rehab, we also set up a cool program where we would run an entire farm for a summer for kids in the special ed program. And then they would get a certificate at the end of the summer for food services. We would work with chefs in the area and with farmers, and they would learn to grow, harvest, sell food, and then they would do weekly meals for families and the people from the area that would then pay $5 to come, and then they would serve them. And then at the end of the summer, they would get a certificate. That was a program we would do for the regional schools. So, yeah, so I based this on the model that was in Europe, and I was shooting for all of these, and I was expecting maybe one or two, so I was really surprised it went so well. And ever since then, I have shared what we were able to do with many people in the US, but I know that many others have struggled to copy it. I think it might be different in every state, and it's my number one tip would be if this is what you do and you're looking towards getting these contracts, is to talk to the case manager of the population you want to serve. They're the ones that work with the clients, and they're the ones that are looking for places, and they can explain usually what it takes. Because obviously many of these programs would have different requirements, but almost all requirements with a little creativity could be met on the farm. And sometimes they had to be met through the organization I was working at with A+ Healthcare. But many times it was really not that difficult. I would have to run background checks on my farm. I had to give them certain risk training, or I'd have to make sure they were insured properly. We had to measure the goals of the participants and report on them. But that's kind of what we did in our office, which is the same model as we have for the regional organizations in the Netherlands. I'm checking the time here. Oh yeah, 25 minutes. I'm almost done. And so, yeah. And so I think I came across some other care farms occasionally, and many of them I could see would either work with donations or private pay. which I think is a great model too, but it was just, I almost did it because I wanted to show that it could be done, that you could integrate in the healthcare system in the US too. And everyone told me it couldn't be done. So then I was like, okay, then we have to do it. And I did have some farms that worked with us that were also taking private pay. But yeah, and what was also important to me is that it was really valued as care, as a full substitute of existing care, except in a totally integrative, holistic way. And that's what, that's what was inspiring for people to see that it could be done. And I think you guys probably get the same, but we get a lot of very nice local publicity. Well, yeah, I put these two websites on, if your browser translates, you can go on these. The one is also available in English. The bottom one, that's the foundation in Switzerland that I'm the director of. And the top one is the Dutch organization. And Kate, if people want, you can totally share my PowerPoint. There's more slides behind this last one just for resource purposes. Yeah, so that's kind of my introduction. Any questions? I will stop sharing. That'll be, then we can see each other a little easier. There we go.
I'll also throw links that you just shared in the chat too.
Yep.
Well, thank you, Martin.
I could imagine it's a little bit of an earful.
So you left the US 6 years ago.
Yes.
And the Montana, do the farm programs still exist then?
They still exist.
Montana?
I think there's now only 3 active farms. Some of them retired and some of them dropped out during the COVID time. And yeah, the company was bought out by a different company, and so I don't have as much contact with them anymore. But yeah, I sometimes wish I would have stayed and would have kept growing it. We tried to do something like you guys are doing. We even wrote for a grant with the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, but got denied. And then I got some really amazing job offers in Europe again, and so life, how it goes with little kids.
Absolutely.
Martin, I don't have any questions. I just wanted to say thank you for taking the time and presenting today. I'm familiar with your name. I started a care farm down here in Central Texas almost about 10 years ago, and I was researching animal-assisted therapies and didn't come up with a lot of research in the U.S. market, and then stumbled across the care farming model in Europe. And I've seen your name pop up a lot, as well as Jan Hassink. So thanks so much for taking the time. I'm just really indebted. I studied a lot of your models to build Simple Sparrow's model here in Central Texas, and it's just really it's been really neat to hear you present today. So thanks for that.
You bet. And I did notice that in the US there's a lot of people who do the who offer animal assisted therapy or horticulture therapy. And interestingly enough, internationally, they are sometimes mixed up in the same, but the Care Farm model is a little more what people call a hidden program. It's more like, hey, you're at the farm and we're working here, and you're just somebody who's volunteering or working or wherever you feel about being there. And so it's not like I'm going to do a session of animal assisted therapy, although many care farms do use horses and sometimes even, horse therapists and stuff. But in some countries, care farming really means like therapy sessions. And in some countries, it's more like what we have, where you have a farm and people are just part of the day and the program there. And Jamie, did you ever come across Keith Anderson? He was a social work professor for a little while in Texas, and before that he was a social work professor in Montana, and he did some research on my program up there. So You're,
No, I'll have to look him up. I have family in Montana, and I'm from Colorado technically, and now I'm in Central Texas. But I'll have to look up Anderson. And we had an intern named Nikki Newtonboom. She works as a trauma informed therapist at Care Farms in the Hague
oh,
area.
wow,
So yeah.
that's
Oh,
funny. That's,
yeah. Thanks for that, Martin. Keith
This
Anderson.
is Gracie. I'm also from Texas. What university was that social work professor at in
oh,
Texas?
let me check. I'll have to Google him real
Well,
quick.
yeah,
Because
okay.
he moved on, but he was in Texas for a little while.
Okay, well, maybe he's not anymore. I'm also in Central Texas, and I also have a question besides that. I'd
Go
like
for it.
Hearthfire Farm is intending, we have just a day program now, but we're intending to have a life sharing style residential as well.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that most things were day farms, but do you have anything to say about those that have a residential program as well?
Yeah.
Life
So,
sharing.
so about a third of the farms in the Netherlands also provide living care. And yeah, I mean, obviously it requires a bigger commitment because you have people living with you. We also have, you know, a specific certification for people who provide that kind of care. Um, I didn't do it in my program in Montana, but I had one farm who did. They were, you know, funded through donations and fundraising and all that stuff. And yeah, I'm actually approached quite often by fairly large high-end institutions in the US that want to start some sort of care farm. Like they basically want to buy a farm and put a bunch of residences on there, which tends to be different from farmers who want to include people in their farm by allowing them to live on the farm. Um, it's, you know, it's what I've seen in Switzerland. This is quite common, and they have a low amount of people, like maybe one or two living per farm, and then they can provide the care that people need or the support for them to work on the farm. I have found that to be pretty intensive, like for your family, because you have to integrate them in your life. Most of the farms that do it in the Netherlands will actually have like a separate building and don't do all the shifts themselves, but you know, have employees that help provide the care because it can be a kind of, it can take a toll on your family.
So you're not aware of like larger situations, like for instance, the L'Arche programs and Camp Hill villages?
Yes, I know them. Yeah. Yeah, those are, I think Camp Hill is a really cool concept. I visited one in Wisconsin one time.
Mm-hmm.
And we have some in other parts of Europe too.
Mm-hmm.
In the Netherlands, there's actually not, I think there's maybe one, but many do work in a similar way. But I think the Camp Hill is a cool concept. Yep,
Thank you.
you bet. So Shelley is on this call, and Shelley, yeah, Lighthouse Christian Home. That was the one that had the. So Shelley, I want to hear from you. What are you doing in California?
Well, hi everyone. So I met Martin, like I said, I don't know, it must have been 10 years ago by now. But
Yep.
So I also have a son who has multiple challenges, and I was going to college at the time for my PhD, and I was also looking at activities for him to be involved in. And it's really, especially we were visiting, our family is in Montana. Montana has a very challenging environment for programming, but I live in California, so I ended up meeting Martin out there, and then I went over to volunteer then at the Lighthouse Christian Home so that I can learn more about a residential experience. I've also visited Camp Hill communities, but I live in a urban area in Southern California, and I always grappled with this idea with these big, vast farms in Montana, and I've been to the Netherlands previous years, and I was like, how do I apply a care farm model in an urban area? And so what I did was I started at the University of Redlands where I work, and we have a garden. So I just brought the middle school and high school special ed students over to the university, and we just had them incorporate some work into the garden program here. And then this last year, I started my own nonprofit called Urban Earth Care Farm. And because I have a little knowledge of what Martin was doing up in Montana, where he had some of it funded, my husband and I thought, how are we ever going to get this funded? Like, who's going to come and how can they pay for this if we want to develop this program? Because we bought a piece of land and we were trying to figure out how to make it work. But in California, we have, through the disability waiver, we have developmental disability waiver. We have regional centers, and it's funded. We have, there's usually money through the transitional program where you can go into different day programs or things, nothing related to what Martin was doing or what's going on with the Care Farm Network. But recently we have this self-determination program, which I thought was interesting because you mentioned in the Netherlands, you were able to manage your own budget, so you can figure out what types of services you wanted and how you wanted to spend your money, the budget. And so that's what California is doing. We have a self-determination program now. You get your budget based on the types of services you need. So I said, hey, this is the perfect time to launch Urban Earth Care Farm, because now we have people that have money that they can pick their own program. My son's been in 3-day programs, and quite honestly, they're coloring, they're not doing anything to develop his potential. So I pitched this with our regional center, the local regional center. We have one client right now. It's self-determined. He comes and does it when he wants to. We budget him for 12 sessions a month because he's very involved. He has a lot. He's nonverbal. He struggles with a lot of different challenges. So anyway, so we're funded now by one client. So we're starting as like you did. So I just made a pitch with the regional center again for another client. And so it's going to be funded by kind of the state money, the money that's coming to the individuals, and they get to come. So they're going to come to like day camp. I mean, I have a history of working for the YMCA day camps. You know, I'm an environmental professor. I do a lot of experiential opportunities for my, neurotypical students. So my son's community is all neurodivergent, and I wanted to have something for them. So
Yeah.
they're doing it, but it's coming slow. I think maybe we've got 4 other people in the pipeline to have their budget include Urban Earth Care Farm. So it's farm activities. It's all pre-vocational right now. We're just going to do just seeing how they can do. We set up, I created a course this semester at the university where the students helped me develop pre-vocational activities on the farm. We have 100 activities now, and they did pre-vocational skills and task analysis, breaking down each task for the participants. So we're moving and shaking, but we're not anywhere near what the Care Farm Network or Red Wiggler's doing. I'm so excited to meet this group because I had only met Martin. So when I found the Care Farm Network, I was like, oh, I need to be a part of this group. I mean, I want to be with all of you all. You're all doing good things.
Yeah. Well, that's cool to hear. And you know, like I said, my first year, I got very few clients, and only the ones that no other provider wanted to touch because they were very difficult people. But you know, we served them well, and were able to, you know, do a lot of presenting and talking in the community. That really helped. And building relationships with the case managers. And that's, you know, and in Montana, like from about September on, nobody ever wants to go to the farm because they're just thinking of winter and cold. And so every March through August, I would get all my referrals, and then, you know, be kind of in a standstill in the winter. But then, you know, as it grew, we would get more and more.
this is a little bit to one side, but I think it's actually a good idea. We should have an exchange program so that people can come to Texas in the winter and people can go to Montana in the summer. I mean,
Oh
I
yeah.
don't know, that would be a complicated thing, but for some people, I actually think that could work.
Oh yeah. I know some of the farmers would actually go down to Texas and get some vitamin D in the winter. Well, any other questions?
Hi, I'm Eliza. Thank you so much. This is amazing. I was wondering, we've just started our care farm, and we've been very lucky to get groups coming from the ARC, like Dayhab groups are just coming all together. So they're providing the transportation stuff, and we just do some programming, and it's small scale right now while we build, but hopefully it will turn into like a 5-day-a-week thing. But I was just kind of curious when you were talking about compliance and like safety stuff, you referred to how many regulations there are, but could you just speak a little about the just kind of safety regulations that you want to make sure your farmers have?
Yeah, so I think for you it was more helpful to talk about what I did in the US. In the Netherlands, you know, we have very specific rules and regulations, but I did copy some of that when I applied it in to America. So I shared it with Kate and Andrea. There's like we would have like all risks you could come up with, like farm equipment, dogs, medication, guns. Well, guns was kind of funny. Of course, I didn't have any regulations on guns in Europe because the only people with guns are police officers. But in the US, I had to come up with mitigation of risk of guns. And most ranchers have a gun right by the door for coyotes. And, you know, anyway.
No, I get it. We have a neighbor who likes to shoot at us because he doesn't like us. So
there you
that's
go.
the big one.
So anyway, so I had this like 42 points risk assessment where you would describe the risk that you see and how you mitigate it. This was important, and I discussed this with the insurance agencies. You know, they can agree that it's not a risk-free environment, but you have to show what you've done to mitigate the risks as much as possible.
Yeah.
I would also provide training, and I would sometimes kind of do surprise visits to my farms to kind of see what they were doing. Especially the male ranchers I mentioned before were very risk tolerant. And so I'd have to really coach them on, you know, what you can do and can't do. But what was also important, I would really involve the family and the client in the fact that there are risks. And most people really appreciated that because they felt like their child or partner would be too shielded in all other forms of care they would. And so they liked it. You know, I had a guy break a collarbone and nobody ever got, you know, mad. And I had people chopping wood, you know, which was kind of terrifying for me to watch, but you know, it always went well. And it's part of the care farm model that you expose people to risk because it takes them out of themselves and builds tremendous confidence. But so I would have them sign a waiver. I would get them really involved. And like the care farm challenge that Shelley mentioned, I would invite all the parents and family members, and so they felt connected. And then you're not like this vague organization that they can sue, because we both are very open about the risks that are present and that we take. And then I would actually, once a risk assessment was filled out, I would visit them and review, you know, what they did and kind of see what they did. And then, you know, when things do go wrong, which they do, you know, we had kind of a good procedure on reporting anything that could go wrong. Some programs required it. And then when something goes wrong, you know, like the world is these days, then you have to tell them what you're changing to make sure it doesn't go wrong again. Whereas obviously there's some risks that you want to just accept. And so that kind of whole package where it would make them aware, train them, coach them, fill out the risk assessment, involve the parents, sign the waiver, and then learn from mistakes. That was kind of how it would protect it. And most farms were able to get their fairly regular insurance. I forget what it was called, but I was surprised that they didn't require, we did develop like this sentence of how you should tell them what was going on there to get your insurance. Because if you say, well, I have a bunch of disabled people walking around chopping wood, then obviously it was going to be difficult.
I think we have a good insurance policy. But yeah, your little talk there with that 5-part,
Yeah.
5-step model is really, really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah,
That's
you
great.
bet.
I want
And
to
I
say
see-
something about farms and insurance. I don't know if this is true in all states, but here in Texas, just an ordinary farm that might have visitors or sell flowers at a stand or whatever is encouraged to have signage that says you're in a place that has scorpions and rattlesnakes, or
Right.
Yeah.
this is rough terrain, or there's scratchy stuff over there. And if you have the signs up, then it is one of the mitigation things that means that your insurance isn't as high as your liability insurance is not as high as it would be if you did not have the signs.
Right.
So
yeah,
just telling people like that.
and that's part of mitigation too, that you
Yeah.
show that that you do, that you have told people that the risks are there, or you've protected them. And like some farms had a lot of horses, and so we would make agreements on when, or if people would even be allowed to come close to the horses, because they can be unpredictable. And I had a fair amount of clients that developmentally disabled and traumatic brain injury, and they could be quite unpredictable themselves. So we had to be quite careful with that kind of stuff. But on the other hand, if they are able to be there and control themselves, it can be a major growth point. So yeah.
Thanks.
Martin, were you referring to the quality framework that you shared? Is that
No, the quality framework, that's kind of like that's very recent for us. So, 30 years in the making, we now have a quality framework. The quality framework was that's something we set up the last, 3 years we've been working on that. That really describes how farmers learn and measure how people like the care on their farm and report it externally. Because there are so many rules, most rules and regulations are there to check if you're doing the right thing. And with all certification schemes, when that becomes important, people do everything to comply with the check, with the audit, but not actually apply the real idea behind the rule. And so because we are fighting regulations, we set up this kind of self-regulation, self-learning system between farmers as a way, and we've been accepted now by the national government that that's something that provides better input on how to apply things like safety or patient rights or abuse and neglect, all those kind of concepts that are important in the world of care in the daily practice of farms, which makes controls and checks less important because we know that they're applying it in practicality. And that's kind of cool. Like, I think many of you guys are in the, in the early stages, or maybe not, but we do this because we think we can provide better care than that's being provided in the larger institutions. And so we can be very inspiring for the regular healthcare system. And that was, especially in the early days in the Netherlands, that was, our big story. Then we had the first things go wrong, and we had some negative stories, which is why we really invested more in the quality framework. But now, we have an aging population, more and more needs of care, a lot of youth care, but less and less money. And now we are kind of the innovative party and coming up with concepts that allow people to live independent lives better and longer without heavier forms of care. And so the innovation side of care farming, a lot of the things we do, we say, let me think of it. I have to think of the English word. we are capable without knowing it, basically. The things we do are usually the things that are in all the policy documents for the future of care, but we're doing it. And to learn that quality framework also allowed us to translate what we do, our true core, to the language of the policymakers. And so that's been a really powerful tool for us to kind of come out of the defensive and show what we're doing for society. So
You had
fun.
also mentioned that you provide some opportunities for trainings for your members.
Yeah.
I'm just curious what care farmers in the Netherlands are interested in learning about, because as a network, we're always trying to think about webinars and trainings and how to engage and like fill in where people are needing that support. What do you hear?
Yeah, so some are target audience specific, so about autism or de-escalation techniques if people, have problems. We have a lot of training that are required by the state. And so, they can be about sexual exploitation, that you need to know and recognize these things with your clients. Some are, let me actually look it up. I don't know it by head. So by heart, actually. I don't speak English to an American crowd that often, even though we speak English at home. But just a sec here.
Well, your English is much better than my Dutch.
I believe it.
And
Dutch is,
actually, I would say saying it, knowing it by head actually makes more sense than knowing it by heart. Because we don't have knowledge here, we hold it here, so.
yeah, that's the Dutch way of saying it. You know it by head, not by heart. Yeah, so physical and mental resilience, using methods of pedagogic developments in your care, social competence, so how you develop social competence in clients, trainings like that, management classes for people who have employees. We have like systems where you can help people learn from their mistakes. We have domestic violence and reporting requirement training, difficult behavior reflecting on yourself training, working and communicating with families, group dynamics, working with groups, introduction classes, nonviolent communication, so things like that. What was helpful for me in Montana is like the developmental disabled waiver had like a list of topics that were allowed for their continued ed. I had to provide 12 hours of training every year to the farmers, and they had a really long list, like 30 topics, and the farmers and I would just say, okay, what are we going to do next training? And we would do 4 trainings a year, and we would just pick some and then invite guest speakers and stuff. It was really fun. Like it's really fun to talk with each other about, certain topics like autism relating to the clients you serve. Yeah. And yeah, so I remember I would make like fact sheets too, like about dementia or autism. Like farmers sometimes, especially in the beginning, will treat clients like their kids, which can be loving, but can also be more strict or more like maybe punishing than is allowed in the healthcare system. If a child misbehaves, you can maybe say, I'm going to take your bike away, and you're not going to be allowed to ride your bike for a day. In care, you can't do that because there's rules on the rights of clients in so these were things I had to really kind of train and coach them on too. Like what does it mean to be a professional caregiver? We want clients to feel normal and like part of the family, but they still have the same rights as they do in all other care settings.
Any other questions from folks? I can share that I really hope that we're not far behind from the Netherlands in terms of kind of the government entity recognizing the value that care farming brings. And to hear you say that at first you had to sort of fight your way to the top and prove that value, it's probably why we all have leaned so much on the research that has come out in
Yeah.
terms of that benefit. And I'm really heartened to see the number of researchers within the care farming network now here in America that are doing research too, because I think there's still not only that awareness to bring, but also kind of the proof and data and that research piece that says, yes, this does work. So
Yeah, and you know, I think it is easier for you guys to be close behind because there is more available now. You know,
Mhm.
we kind of were able to sail on the wings of Italy, who was much earlier on this development than the Netherlands, and Norway was also kind of ahead of us. Uh, and yeah, and so and like I've told you guys before, I think it's really fun, and in a way you guys are doing one of the dreams I had, and so I'll give you whatever you need to get it going, because it's just really fun for me to see. And I'll put a little overview. It's kind of old. It's like 12 years old, but it's a really good overview of all the research that was done on care farming until that time.
Mm.
So I I printed that off and waved it around at every meeting I had in Montana. I said, there's proof that this works. And nobody ever wanted to read my document. They just would look at it and be like, wow, academic research. Wow, it must be working. And so you guys can just print the cover and wave that around.
Thank you. Yeah, and I should note that on our website, on Care Farming Network's website, you can find under the resource page links to research.
Oh, yeah.
So that's something that we're always putting up, and we're hoping is helpful to members. If you're grant writing, if you're looking for any kind of funds. Martin, if you're finding like big donors coming your way looking for farms in America, you know where to send them, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, just
Unfortunately,
wanted to
like
say.
the organizations with a lot of money are usually institutional care providers that want to kind of use the green care in their models. But yeah, there's quite a bit of new research coming out from the Netherlands too, and here every research paper has to be published in English. So it'll be mostly about dementia, but
Mm-hmm.
it should be coming online in the coming months. So
All right. Well, hey, thank you so much for taking the time. It's probably close to what, midnight for you? Almost there?
nah, not too bad. It's 9 p.m.
Okay. And the storm? You still hearing the wind whip around outside?
Yep,
Okay. Well,
it's all good.
sorry we sent our weather your way, but thank you so much for your time. Thanks for sharing everything in the chat. We'll make sure that we share this back out too, for those that couldn't make it today. But Martin, really appreciate your time, what
You
you
bet.
did to pave the way for care farming, and for being so open to sharing with us. So
Yeah, well, like I said, I'm inspired by what you guys are doing, and I can't wait to see what goes on. So I get excited when I get your newsletters. I'm like, okay, let's see what's going on. So thank you for tying me into what you're doing.
absolutely.
All
All
right.
right, everyone. Well, we'll see you hopefully at December's monthly member gathering. And until then, be well.
See you guys.
Bye-bye.